The client app is almost complete. I will now write the code to select books images in the books form. We will render the books image related components on the left side of the books form component. It means that we need to add two columns which will be rendered inside one row. We will need a panel and an input group that contains a form control and a drop-down button, and finally we need an image component where to render the selected image. Alright, if you go to React Bootstrap website and select Forms from the menu inside the Components page, and you scroll down to the Input Group section, you will find an input group made by a text box and a drop-down button, which is perfect for our purpose. Let's find the code and copy it. Now open books form. I already import input group drop-down button, image, col and row from React Bootstrap. As I said, in render method we add one row and then two columns. Inside the first column we add a panel, and inside the panel we paste the input group component we copied from React Bootstrap website. We also need to cut the other panel and its content inside the second column. Now we can start editing the input group to meet our needs. Firstly, we need to add a ref and value. Value will come from the state, so for now leave it blank. Just write it so you don't forget to edit it later. Let's modify the title to be select an image and add the primary PS style. Now menu item will be the list of images files we get from the API. Therefore we need to render this dynamically. The list will be held by a constant variable we are going to write in a moment. Before I forget, let's also add an image component. The image source will come from the state, so I will leave this blank too for a moment, and I set the image to be responsive, so to resize it automatically depending on the user screen. At this point we can start defining the state for this part of the component. So for not polluting the shopping cart state, we will manage this piece of state for this part of the component directly in books item. We start importing a menu item that I forgot to add previously. We also import Axios for making the HTTP request from here. And we define the initial state for images that will be an array of objects. And img that will simply be a string for holding the image path. Now we will make our API request from component didMount. Remember to add bind these to keep this in context, and use the response to fill the image array. By the way, if you don't want to use bind this, you could use the arrow function. Personally, I'm not a great fan of the arrow function, and it is not a standard yet. We then catch any error, and if an error occurs, we empty the img field. At this point, we can write our map function to dynamically render the drop-down button menu with a list of images coming from the API. Let's test this code to make sure everything looks good so far. Perfect. The new component is visible and renders the list of images. All components are still displayed in one single column, so we need to tell the columns how they should display themselves at different resolutions. Obviously, use the same setting for the other column. And now, if we refresh the admin page, the components in books form are equally distributed in two columns. Let's go back and complete the code. When users select an image from the list, the image needs to be displayed. So in menu item, we need an on-click event. We call it handle select, and we pass the selected image name. Remember to add this at the end to get it in the right context. And we write the handle select function, which takes the image name as parameter and set the state of img equal to image path and concatenates the name. We have now our state ready to be consumed, so we can define the form control value to be equal to this state img. Let's quickly test it to ensure this piece of code is working correctly. When we select an image name, the path is rendered in the input field. Let's now set the source for the image component to preview the image and test it again. And fantastic, we can render the image preview of this selected image. There is one thing we still need to fix. You might have noticed that since we removed the initial books data from the state, our drop-down to select books to be deleted is not rendering the IDs anymore. And we also need to remove the books form from the home page. Let's quickly fix the delete books drop-down by importing the get books action and dispatching get books from component did mount. We also need to add get books in a map dispatch props function. Let's save and refresh. And yes, we are fetching the books ID now. Let's open books list component and remove the column with the books form. Save and refresh. And the books form is now visible only from the admin link. Now, if you try to submit a new book and select an image, the image will not be rendered. This is happening because we still need one last thing to do. In our books model, we define an images field to hold the image, and we need to submit our image path inside the handle submit function. Make sure you call it images with the S at the end. In our books model, we wrote the image field after the description. It's not relevant, but just for the sake of consistency, let's keep the same format and write images in the same position. We also need to add the images property in our book list component to pass down the image data to book item component. And finally, we need to render the image inside book item component. And because the image covers will be usually taller than larger, maybe it will look better if we render the book image in a separate column. I already tested this component at different screen size, and therefore I can tell you that these are, on my opinion, the best width settings for the columns, but you are free to disagree. Now we can add an image component inside the first column. And remember to import image component from React Bootstrap. And maybe you want also to include the image path in handle cart function, just in case you decide to display the product image in the cart. And now if you save and refresh, you can see that the layout has changed. Obviously, no images will be available for the books you already submit. If you try to submit a new image, oops, I got an error. Let me see. All right, I named the ref image. So let's correct the ref name in the handle submit function and test it again. And yes, it's working correctly.